There is something strange about a show that has been on the air long enough to start rhyming with reality. Not predicting it in any deliberate way, not mapping it out with charts and calculations and some hidden knowledge that the rest of us do not have access to, but rhyming with it, producing a joke in March that lands differently in April, writing a throwaway line about a public figure in 2005 that nobody thinks about twice until 2017, when the line suddenly sounds less like comedy and more like testimony. Putting a scene on television that seems completely harmless for years, and then one afternoon something happens in the real world and millions of people go back to that scene and watch it again with entirely different eyes. That is what Family Guy has been doing, quietly, consistently, and sometimes disturbingly, for more than 25 years. Family Guy premiered on January 31st, 1999. It aired right after Super Bowl 33 on Fox, which at the time was one of the most coveted time slots in all of American television. 22 million people watched that first episode. It was called Death Has a Shadow. It was written and created by Seth MacFarlane, directed by Peter Shin and Roy Allen Smith, and it introduced the world to the Griffin family. Peter, the loud and impulsive father. Lois, his patient and sharp-tongued wife. Meg, the perpetually embarrassed teenage daughter. Chris, the sweet and clueless son. Stewie, the diabolical talking baby. And Brian, the martini-drinking dog who served as the family's unlikely voice of reason. The show was messy and loud and strange, and it leaned hard into a comedy style that nobody on network television had really seen before. It built its episodes around a combination of traditional sitcom plots and something called cutaway gags, short unrelated scenes that would interrupt the story, like a memory or a joke bouncing off something a character had just said. Peter would mention a celebrity or a situation, and the show would cut to a 5 or 10-second scene illustrating the reference, usually with an absurd or dark twist, and then snap back to the main story as if nothing had happened. Those cutaway gags became the signature of the show. They were what made Family Guy feel different from The Simpsons or King of the Hill or any of the other animated comedies on television at the time. And over the years, as the show produced season after season after season, those cutaways piled up into the thousands. Jokes about politicians, jokes about athletes, jokes about actors and musicians and public figures from every corner of American culture. Jokes about events that had not happened yet. Jokes about things that were only rumours at the time. Jokes about situations that seemed completely fictional when they aired and then became headlines years later. Most of those jokes were forgotten within minutes. That is the nature of a cutaway gag. It arrives, it gets a reaction, and it disappears. The story moves on. The viewer moves on. Nobody writes it down or files it away or treats it as anything other than a quick laugh wedged between the actual plot of the episode. But some of them did not stay forgotten. Some of them came back, not because anyone at the show intended them to, but because the real world caught up with the joke in ways that nobody could have anticipated. A line about a celebrity's private life turned out to be accurate years before the public knew about it. A gag about a specific event turned out to mirror something that actually happened weeks after the episode aired. A throwaway reference to a political figure turned out to describe their real-world behaviour with uncomfortable precision, years before anyone outside of certain circles had any reason to suspect it. And when those moments surfaced, when people started compiling clips and posting them online and saying, "Family Guy predicted this," the show's reputation shifted. It was no longer just an irreverent, animated comedy about a dysfunctional family in Quahog, Rhode Island. It became, in the eyes of millions of internet users, something stranger. Something that seemed to have a direct line to the future. A cartoon that knew things before they happened. The show has now been running for 24 seasons. It has produced over 447 episodes. In April of 2025, Fox renewed it for 4 additional seasons in what was described as a mega deal, which means Family Guy will remain on the air through at least the 2028 to 2029 television season. That is 3 decades of content, 3 decades of jokes, 3 decades of cutaway gags referencing every imaginable aspect of popular culture. And scattered throughout those 3 decades, like strange landmarks on a very long road, are the moments where the jokes turned out to be real, where the writers made something up and reality decided to agree with them, where a cartoon that no one was supposed to take seriously produced lines and scenes and references that now sit in a very uncomfortable space between comedy and prophecy. Seth MacFarlane himself has addressed this directly. At the Television Critics Association Winter Press Tour in January of 2018, MacFarlane was asked about the show's apparent ability to predict future events. His response was measured and specific. He said, and this is drawn from his remarks as reported by IndieWire and Rolling Stone at the time, that the idea that Family Guy is this Kreskin-like prognosticator of this kind of stuff is a little sensationalized. He said he was just watching things happen from afar. He described the show's process as the same as any other topical comedy. He said they write their show the same way as everyone else. They make the same kind of topical jokes that The Simpsons does, that South Park does, and they work with what they have, whether that be swirling rumours or political material. That phrase, swirling rumours, is important. It tells you something specific about how these predictions actually happen. MacFarlane was not claiming that his writers had psychic abilities or access to classified information or some kind of inside track on the future. He was saying something simpler and, in its own way, more interesting. He was saying that the writers at Family Guy work in Los Angeles, inside the entertainment industry, surrounded by people who talk. And in an industry where rumours travel faster than headlines, a comedy writer's room that is paying attention will occasionally hear things before the rest of the world does. Sometimes, those things turn out to be true, and when they do, the joke that was based on a rumour suddenly looks like a prediction. Alex Sulkin, one of the show's executive producers, put it even more directly. Speaking to Deadline in June of 2018, Sulkin said that it is almost like a stopped watch is right twice a day. He said they throw a lot out there, and then when certain things come to pass, they seem like Nostradamus, because nobody is pointing out the 20 other ridiculous things they said that were not even close to coming true. Richard Apple, another executive producer who also wrote for The Simpsons, made a similar point. He said that with 300 plus episodes at that time, and the number has grown significantly since, it is almost incompetent if you cannot get a couple of things right. He noted that what Family Guy does through parody is take things that are in the air, and as long as you make them funny, you can get them out there, because the show is not a documentary. It is a comedy, and comedy gives you permission to touch on subjects that might be considered off-limits in other contexts. That explanation makes sense. It is reasonable. It accounts for the Hollywood insider predictions without requiring anything supernatural. It explains the volume of coincidences by pointing to the volume of content the show has produced. And it is probably, in most cases, the correct explanation. But it does not explain all of them, because some of the things Family Guy got right were not based on rumours. Some of them were not things that anyone in a Los Angeles writer's room could have known about. Some of them were pure coincidences, so specific and so precisely timed that even the people who made the show were surprised when they happened. And that is what tonight is about. We are going to go through every documented instance where Family Guy appeared to predict the future. Not quickly, not in a rush to get through a list and move on to the next video. Slowly, one at a time, episode by episode, prediction by prediction. We're going to look at what the show actually said, when it said it, what happened in the real world afterward, and how close the match actually was. Some of these will make you smile. Some of them will make you uncomfortable. Some of them will make you wonder, even knowing everything MacFarlane and his producers have said about how the show works, whether something else is going on, Whether a show that has been running this long and producing this much content has somehow crossed a line from comedy into something that nobody fully understands. Or maybe it really is just a stopped watch. Maybe 447 episodes and thousands upon thousands of cutaway gags is simply enough material that reality was bound to overlap eventually. Maybe the human brain is wired to find patterns in randomness, and the internet is wired to amplify those patterns until they feel significant. Either way, the overlap exists, the moments are real, the clips are real, the dates are verifiable, the headlines are a matter of public record, and laying them all out, one after another, in the order that tells the clearest story, is a strange and fascinating experience that says something not just about a cartoon, but about the way reality and fiction run alongside each other, and sometimes, without warning, collide. Let us start with the ones that feel the most like coincidence. The predictions that are easy to smile at, easy to explain, easy to file under lucky guess. And then gradually, we will work our way toward the ones that are harder to dismiss. The ones where the gap between the joke and the reality is so narrow that even the most skeptical person in the room has to pause for a moment and admit that it is, at the very least, deeply strange. The first set of predictions we're going to look at are the ones that sit comfortably in the territory of amusing coincidence. These are the moments where Family Guy made a joke or referenced something in passing, and the real world happened to move in the same direction years later. They are not eerie, they are not disturbing. They are the kind of thing that makes you raise your eyebrows slightly and say, well, that is interesting, and then move on with your evening. But they are worth going through carefully, because they establish a pattern that will become harder and harder to dismiss as we go deeper. The first one involves Bitcoin. In an episode that aired during the show's later seasons, the Griffin family is once again dealing with financial problems. This is not unusual. The Griffins have been struggling with money in one form or another for most of the show's run. Peter does not have a high-paying job. His spending habits are catastrophic. The family's financial stability is a recurring source of both comedy and plot. In this particular episode, while Lois is wishing there were a better way to save money, Peter offhandedly mentions Bitcoin. He brings it up casually, the way you might mention something you half heard about but do not fully understand. Nobody in the scene gives it much thought. The conversation moves on. Bitcoin, at the time the episode aired, was still a relatively obscure concept to most people. It existed, it had a small but dedicated community of enthusiasts and investors. But it was not a household word, it was not something that most American families were discussing at the dinner table. It was a niche financial instrument that most people, if they had heard of it at all, associated with the fringes of the internet. Then the early 2020s happened. Bitcoin's value skyrocketed into the tens of thousands of dollars per coin. Major companies began accepting it as payment. PayPal added Bitcoin support. Financial institutions that had previously dismissed cryptocurrency as a passing fad began integrating it into their platforms. The word Bitcoin went from niche jargon to front-page news practically overnight. And Peter Griffin's casual offhand mention of it in a throwaway scene suddenly looked like the most prescient financial advice anyone on television had ever given. He did not elaborate. He did not explain what Bitcoin was or why it mattered. He just said the word, and reality did the rest. Now, to be clear, predicting that Bitcoin would become significant is not the same as predicting a specific event. Plenty of people in the technology and finance world had been saying for years that cryptocurrency would eventually become mainstream. Peter's mention of it is less a prediction and more a reflection of something that was already in the air if you were paying attention. But the fact that it appeared on a cartoon about a dysfunctional family in Rhode Island, delivered as a throwaway line by a man who in the show's own canon has an IQ of 70, is the kind of detail that makes people share clips and say, Family Guy predicted this. The comedy of it is not that the show knew Bitcoin would rise. The comedy is that Peter Griffin, of all people, was the one who said it. The second coincidence in this lighter category involves Barry Manilow. In the Season 6 episode Back to the Woods, which aired on February 17, 2008, Peter Joe Cleveland and Quagmire attend a Barry Manilow concert. The joke is built around the idea that all four men genuinely love Manilow's music but are reluctant to admit it publicly. There is an element of embarrassment to their fandom, a sense that enjoying Barry Manilow is something these particular men feel they should not be caught doing. Quagmire is even serenaded by Manilow himself during the concert, which becomes one of the episode's more memorable moments. The show treats Manilow's appeal as something of an open secret. The joke works because it plays on the long-standing cultural assumption that Manilow's fan base included a significant number of people who did not fit the expected demographic. There was always a wink and a nod quality to discussions about Manilow's popularity, a sense that there was something more going on beneath the surface of his public image. In 2017, 9 years after that episode aired, Barry Manilow publicly came out as gay. He confirmed that he had been in a relationship with his manager, Gary Keefe, since 1978, and that the two had married in 2014. It was presented as news, but the reaction from many in the entertainment industry and the broader public was less shock and more acknowledgement. The phrase that kept coming up was that it was an open secret. People who had been paying attention, people inside the industry especially, had known or suspected for decades. Manilow himself said he had not come out earlier because he was concerned about how it would affect his female fan base. Family Guy's treatment of Manilow in 2008, 9 years before the public announcement, captured the open secret quality of the situation almost perfectly. The show did not say Manilow was gay. It did not need to. It built an entire scene around the unspoken understanding that there was something about Manilow that his male fans found slightly uncomfortable to be associated with publicly, and it let the audience fill in the rest. When the real announcement came nearly a decade later, the scene retroactively looked like the show had been saying something specific. The third coincidence is one of the show's most playful predictions, and it involves a movie sequel. In North by North Quahog, which was the very first episode of Season 4, the season that marked Family Guy's return from cancellation, Peter and Lois go on a second honeymoon. The episode aired on May 1st, 2005. It was written by Seth MacFarlane himself and directed by Peter Shin. During the episode, Peter and Lois discover a film reel for a sequel to Mel Gibson's 2004 film, The Passion of the Christ. The fictional sequel is titled The Passion of the Christ, To Crucify This, and it reimagines Jesus Christ as an action hero who teams up with Chris Tucker in an intense homage to the Rush Hour film series. It is exactly the kind of absurd, irreverent premise that Family Guy built its reputation on. Peter makes sure that no one ever sees this film, which becomes a minor plot point in the episode. The joke worked because at the time, the idea of a Passion of the Christ sequel felt inherently ridiculous. Gibson's original film had been a massive cultural event in 2004, earning over $600 million worldwide and generating intense public debate about its content and its message. But the film told a very specific story, the final hours of Jesus Christ's life leading to his crucifixion, and there was no obvious path to a sequel. The story, as far as most people understood it, was complete. For years that remained true. Gibson occasionally mentioned in interviews that he was interested in exploring the resurrection as a follow-up, but nothing concrete materialized. The project was discussed and teased and rumoured and delayed across more than a decade and a half. Then, after years of speculation, Gibson officially announced The Resurrection of the Christ as a real production. A genuine sequel to The Passion of the Christ was in development. It would not feature Chris Tucker. It would not be an action comedy. But the core joke that Family Guy had made in 2005, that there would be a Passion sequel that Gibson was determined to make, turned out to be accurate. 20 years separated the joke from the announcement. The specific version Family Guy imagined was different from the one Gibson eventually pursued, but the fundamental prediction that a sequel would happen, despite everyone assuming the story was finished, held up. The fourth coincidence involves something that might seem minor on the surface, but became genuinely relevant when the real world caught up with it. In a Season 4 episode, Peter is shown relaxing in a fancy hotel room and puts on what the show describes as a British adult film. The joke is built around stereotypes about British restraint and propriety. The film Peter watches features a couple who consider getting intimate and then decide not to. When they do eventually get into bed together, there's absolutely no movement, no passion, and everything is completely covered. The humour comes from the contrast between what an American audience expects from adult content and the exaggerated modesty of the British version. 12 years later, in July of 2017, the United Kingdom's government announced plans to implement age verification requirements for adult websites. Under the proposed legislation, users would need to prove their age before accessing adult content online. The plans generated significant public debate, with many expressing concern that the age verification system could be expanded to allow broader government censorship of internet content. Privacy advocates argued that requiring identity verification to access legal content represented a dangerous precedent for online freedom. Family Guy's joke about excessively censored British adult content, made in 2005, had inadvertently anticipated the direction that British policy would actually move in over a decade later. The show imagined a version of British culture so restrained that even its adult content was barely recognisable as such. Reality responded with a government that decided adult content needed to be placed behind verification walls. The joke and the policy are not identical, but they share a common thread: the idea that British attitudes toward adult content would trend toward restriction rather than openness, and the show spotted that thread 12 years early. The fifth coincidence in this lighter category is one that went viral in 2022 and involves one of the most talked about moments in modern awards show history. On March 27, 2022, at the 94th Academy Awards ceremony held at the Dolby Theatre in Los Angeles, actor Will Smith walked onto the stage and slapped comedian Chris Rock across the face. Rock had made a joke about Jada Pinkett Smith's shaved head, and Smith, who had been laughing at the joke initially, abruptly changed demeanour, approached the stage, and delivered a slap that was broadcast live to millions of viewers around the world. The incident dominated global news coverage for weeks. It became one of the most discussed pop culture moments of the decade. Within hours of the slap, social media users began circulating a clip from Family Guy. The clip was from the Season 3 episode Stuck Together Torn Apart, which first aired in January of 2002, 20 years before the Oscars incident. In the clip, Peter Griffin is shown running angrily up the aisle of a packed auditorium towards someone standing behind a microphone. The scene is shot from the perspective of the person at the microphone, and Peter delivers a punch when he arrives. The clip went viral. It was shared millions of times across Twitter and other platforms. Journalist Deji Farami was among those who posted it with the caption that Family Guy predicted the Will Smith slap. News outlets, including Newsweek, covered the apparent prediction. Fans online pointed to the visual similarity between Peter charging up an auditorium aisle to hit someone at a microphone and Smith walking across the Oscars stage to slap Rock. Now, the important context here is that the Family Guy scene and the Oscar incident are not as closely matched as the viral clip suggests. The Family Guy scene is part of a cutaway gag about Peter's jealous streak. It is not set at an awards show specifically. Peter punches rather than slaps. The context of the joke is completely different from the context of the Oscars moment. What made it go viral was the visual similarity: a man angrily approaching someone at a podium in a packed room and striking them, rather than the specifics of the situation. But that visual similarity was enough. 20 years separated the cartoon and the real event. The core image, an angry man storming toward a stage to hit someone in front of a large audience, appeared in both. And in the age of social media, where clips can be extracted from context and placed side by side with real footage in seconds, that was more than enough to add another entry to the growing list of things Family Guy predicted. These are the easy ones, the predictions that make you smile and shake your head slightly and move on. Bitcoin rising, Barry Manilow coming out, a Passion of the Christ sequel, British internet censorship, a celebrity getting hit at an awards show. Each of them, on its own, is a perfectly reasonable coincidence. A show that has been running for 25 years and has produced thousands of topical jokes is statistically likely to overlap with reality from time to time. That is just math. That is just what happens when you produce enough material across enough years. But here is the thing about coincidences. 1 is a fluke, 2 is interesting, 3 starts to form a pattern, and when you get to 5 or 6 or 7, the word coincidence starts to feel a little less adequate. Not because anything supernatural is happening, but because the sheer accumulation of these moments starts to suggest that whatever the writers at Family Guy were doing, whether it was listening to rumours or reading the cultural tea leaves, or simply making so many jokes that some of them had to land, they were doing it with a consistency that is genuinely remarkable. And the predictions we just went through are the gentle ones. They are the ones where the gap between the joke and the reality is wide enough that you can comfortably fit the word coincidence in between them. The ones that come next are different. The ones that come next involve Hollywood specifically. They involve things that were happening behind closed doors in the entertainment industry. Things that the public did not know about. Things that, when they finally became public years, or even decades later, revealed that someone in the Family Guy writers' room had been paying very close attention to whispers that most people never heard at all. There is a phrase that gets used a lot in the entertainment industry when a scandal finally breaks about someone powerful. The phrase is open secret. It means something that many people within a specific community know about or suspect, but that has not yet reached the broader public. Open secrets persist because the people who know about them either do not have enough proof to go public, do not have enough power to challenge the person involved, or simply understand through years of experience that certain things are not spoken about openly even when everyone in the room is aware of them. Hollywood has always been a place where open secrets thrive. The industry is built on relationships, on reputation, on access. People who work inside it depend on maintaining good standing with the people above them. That creates an environment where uncomfortable truths can circulate as whispers for years or even decades before they ever make it into a newspaper or onto a screen. Family Guy, as a show produced in the heart of that industry, with writers who lived and worked in Los Angeles and socialized with people across the entertainment world, was in a unique position. The writer's room was not sealed off from the culture around it. The people who wrote Family Guy went to parties, had dinner with colleagues, heard stories, and picked up on the same undercurrents that everyone else in the industry was aware of. And because Family Guy was a comedy that traded on cultural references and celebrity mockery, those undercurrents sometimes made their way into the scripts. Most of the time, they appeared as jokes. Quick, dark, forgettable jokes buried inside cutaway gags that lasted 5 or 10 seconds and were immediately followed by the next scene. The kind of jokes that viewers at home might laugh at without fully understanding the context. The kind of jokes that only made complete sense if you knew what the writers knew when they wrote them. And then years later, the open secrets became public. And the jokes stopped being jokes. They became something more complicated. Something that raised questions not just about what the writers knew, but about why they chose to put it on television in the form of comedy, rather than doing something else with the information. The most discussed example of this involves Kevin Spacey. In the Season 4 episode Don't Make Me Over, which aired in 2005, there is a scene that became one of the most widely circulated clips in Family Guy's history. In the scene, Brian dares Stewie to do something outrageous. Stewie accepts. What follows is a brief cutaway, showing Stewie running through a crowded shopping mall, screaming that he has just escaped from Kevin Spacey's basement and begging people for help. The scene lasts only a few seconds. It is delivered as a quick shock gag, the kind of dark humour that Family Guy built its brand on. In 2005, when the episode aired, the joke registered as edgy but not particularly meaningful. Kevin Spacey was one of the most respected actors in Hollywood. He had won 2 Academy Awards. He was starring in major films and had recently launched what would become one of the most acclaimed television series of its era, House of Cards. There was no public scandal attached to his name at the time. For most viewers, the joke was just a random piece of Family Guy absurdism. 12 years later, in October of 2017, actor Anthony Rapp came forward with an allegation that changed everything. Rapp, who was appearing in Star Trek Discovery at the time, told BuzzFeed News that in 1986, Spacey had made inappropriate advances toward him. Rapp described the encounter in detail. His account was specific, credible, and devastating. After Rapp's allegations became public, multiple additional men came forward with their own accounts of misconduct by Spacey. The allegations spanned decades. Spacey was fired from House of Cards. His scenes in the already completed film All the Money in the World were reshot with Christopher Plummer in his role. His career, one of the most celebrated in modern American acting, collapsed almost overnight. And in the middle of all of it, the Family Guy clip resurfaced. People who had watched the episode in 2005 went back to that scene and watched it again with new eyes. A cartoon character running through a mall, screaming that he had escaped from Kevin Spacey's basement, was no longer a random dark joke. It was, retroactively, one of the most direct references to what turned out to be a long-running pattern of predatory behaviour by one of the most powerful men in Hollywood. The clip went massively viral. It was shared across every social media platform. News outlets including Newsweek, Complex, Rolling Stone, and IndieWire covered the resurfaced scene and asked the obvious question: did the Family Guy writers know? Seth MacFarlane addressed this directly at the Television Critics Association Winter Press Tour in January of 2018. His answer was careful and revealing. He said he did not pitch the joke himself. He said that when the joke was pitched in the writer's room, the rumour it was based on was one he had actually not heard before. Other people in the writer's room had heard it and had to explain the context to him. Alex Sulkin, who was in the room when the joke was pitched, provided additional context. Speaking to reporters, Sulkin connected the joke to a 2004 incident involving Spacey that had raised eyebrows in the industry. In that incident, Spacey had called London, police claiming he had been mugged in a park late at night. He later retracted the report and offered an alternative explanation, saying he had been tricked by a young person who asked to borrow his phone and then ran off, causing Spacey to trip over his dog. Sulkin said the incident raised a lot of eyebrows within the entertainment community, and that the rumours it generated were what led to the joke being pitched. Sulkin also confirmed something important. He said that the Spacey joke, like similar jokes the show made about other figures, was fact-checked with the show's Standards and Practices Department before it aired. The network's Standards Department would not have cleared a joke like that unless the rumours it referenced were widely enough known within the industry to justify the comedic reference. In other words, the joke was not based on a wild guess. It was based on information that was circulating among people who worked in and around Hollywood. Information that was considered reliable enough for a major network to allow it to be broadcast. Richard Apple, speaking to Deadline in June of 2018, reinforced this point. He said that what Family Guy does through parody is take things that are in the air, and as long as you make them funny, you can get them out there. Comedy, he said, gives you permission to touch on subjects that might be off limits in other contexts. The Spacey joke was an exercise of that permission. The writers heard something. They turned it into a gag. The network cleared it. And 12 years later, the thing they had heard turned out to be true. MacFarlane himself had a similar experience outside of Family Guy. In 2013, when he hosted the Oscar nominations announcement, he made a joke about Harvey Weinstein. The joke referenced the idea that certain actresses no longer had to pretend to be attracted to Weinstein. At the time, it registered as an odd, slightly uncomfortable quip. After the Weinstein scandal broke in 2017, that joke was also retroactively recognised as a pointed reference to behaviour that was widely known inside Hollywood but had not yet reached the public. The Kevin Spacey prediction is the most famous example of Family Guy calling out a Hollywood open secret, but it is not the only one. In the season 10 episode Lego My Mego, which aired in 2012, Family Guy did a parody of the Liam Neeson film Taken. In the parody, Stewie goes undercover at a black market bidding event where wealthy men are placing bids. During the auction scene, one of the bidders is specifically announced as being Brett Ratner. Brett Ratner was, at the time, one of the most successful directors and producers in Hollywood. He had directed the Rush Hour film series and X-Men: The Last Stand. He was connected, powerful, and very much active in the industry. The joke, like the Spacey joke before it, registered as dark Family Guy humour when it aired. A famous director appearing as a bidder at a shady auction was the kind of extreme, provocative gag that the show was known for. 5 years later, in November of 2017, the same month that the broader wave of allegations tied to the Me Too movement was cresting, half a dozen women came forward to accuse Ratner of sexual harassment and assault. Among the accusers were actress and model Natasha Henstridge, who alleged Ratner had forced her to perform a sex act, and actress Olivia Munn, who alleged he had committed an act of indecency in front of her in 2004. Ratner's career effectively ended. He has been largely absent from Hollywood since the allegations were made public. The Family Guy joke from 2012 had placed Ratner in a deeply compromising scenario 5 years before the real allegations surfaced. Like the Spacey joke, it was not a random shot in the dark. It was, according to the show's own producers, based on something that was in the air within the industry. Appel confirmed that the Ratner joke, like the Spacey joke, was fact-checked with standards before airing. The network cleared it because the rumours were considered well-established enough within the entertainment community to support a comedic reference. Newsweek, in a January 2018 article covering the show's apparent predictions, quoted MacFarlane saying that the idea that they had some inside knowledge was overstated. He said he wished they were Kreskin-like enough to predict the future, but they were hearing the same rumours as everyone else in town. The difference was that Family Guy had a format that allowed them to put those rumours on television in the form of jokes, and a network that would let them do it after the appropriate checks were completed. The third Hollywood figure Family Guy appeared to predict involves Charlie Rose. In the season 15 episode, The New Adventures of Old Tom, which aired in 2016, Peter inadvertently ruins the career of Tom Tucker, the local news anchor in Quahog. In the process, Peter compares Tucker's fall from grace to that of Charlie Rose. A cutaway gag shows Rose doing the news while apparently severely hungover, implying that his career had already taken a turn for the worse behind the scenes. At the time, Charlie Rose was one of the most respected journalists in American media. He hosted his own interview show on PBS and served as a co-anchor of CBS This Morning. He was an institution. His reputation was built on decades of serious, thoughtful journalism. The Family Guy gag suggesting his fall from grace seemed like another random celebrity reference. 1 year later, in November of 2017, multiple women came forward with allegations of sexual harassment against Rose. The allegations spanned decades. Both CBS and PBS fired him almost immediately. The Washington Post published the initial report, which included accounts from 8 women who described unwanted sexual advances by Rose. His career ended in a matter of days. Family Guy had placed Rose in a fall from grace narrative a year before his actual fall from grace. The show got the outcome right, a respected media figure losing everything, even though the specific cause was different from what the show depicted. The gag showed Rose as a hungover mess doing the news badly. The reality was that Rose lost his career because of sexual misconduct allegations. But the core prediction that Charlie Rose would suffer a dramatic professional collapse was accurate within a 12-month window. The fourth and final Hollywood prediction in this category involves Ellen DeGeneres, and it is slightly different from the others because it was less about a specific scandal and more about a gradual public revelation. In a Family Guy cutaway gag that aired before any public controversy about Ellen DeGeneres had surfaced, the show depicted Ellen hosting her talk show in a very specific way. In the cutaway, Ellen is shown constantly talking over her guests, barely allowing them to get a word in, dominating every interaction in a way that undermines the conversational format her show was supposedly built on. At the time, Ellen was widely regarded as one of the nicest and most relatable figures in American entertainment. Her talk show was enormously popular. Her public image was built on kindness, generosity, and warmth. The Family Guy cutaway registered as a mild joke about talk show hosting styles and nothing more. Then in 2020, multiple current and former staff members of the Ellen DeGeneres Show came forward with allegations that the show fostered a toxic and hostile work environment. Producers were accused of harassment and intimidation. Ellen herself faced accusations that her public persona of kindness was at odds with how she behaved behind the scenes. The allegations were covered extensively by major news outlets and led to a significant shift in public perception of Ellen. Her show ended in 2022 after 19 seasons. Family Guy's cutaway, which depicted Ellen as domineering and dismissive of the people around her, retroactively looked like one of the earliest public acknowledgements that the image Ellen projected might not match the reality. The show did not predict the specific workplace allegations. It did not name staff members or describe particular incidents, but it captured the essence of the criticism that Ellen's on-screen persona was a performance that concealed something less pleasant underneath, years before the criticism became mainstream. What connects all four of these Hollywood predictions, Spacey, Ratner, Rose, and DeGeneres, is the concept of the open secret. In each case, there were people inside the entertainment industry who knew or suspected what was going on long before the public did. The Family Guy writers, working within that industry and hearing those whispers, turned them into jokes. The jokes aired. The years passed, the whispers became headlines, and the jokes became predictions. Seth MacFarlane's explanation for this is straightforward and probably accurate. The writers have always had very open ears. They work in an environment saturated with industry gossip. They have a format, the cutaway gag, that allows them to reference almost anything in almost any context without it needing to connect to the episode's plot. And they have a network that, after appropriate fact-checking, will let them put those references on the air. The result is a show that functions unintentionally as a kind of running record of what Hollywood insiders were whispering about at any given time. The jokes are time-stamped by their air dates. The whispers are preserved in the form of comedy. And when the whispers eventually become public knowledge, the comedy becomes something else. Something that sits uncomfortably between humour and documentation. But here is what makes the next set of predictions different from everything we have discussed so far. The Hollywood predictions can be explained by insider knowledge. The lighter coincidences can be explained by the sheer volume of material the show produces. Those explanations are rational, defensible, and almost certainly correct. The predictions that come next cannot be explained that way. The predictions that come next were not based on industry gossip. They were not based on swirling rumours. They were not based on anything that a writer sitting in a room in Los Angeles in 2009 or 2012 or 2013 could have reasonably known about. They are the ones where the gap between the joke and the reality is so narrow and so strange that even the people who made them did not see them coming. They are the predictions that feel like something else entirely. There is a difference between a prediction that makes you raise an eyebrow and a prediction that makes you go quiet. The Hollywood predictions we just covered are eyebrow raisers. You hear them and you think, well, writers in Los Angeles hear things. That makes sense. You can file them away under insider knowledge and move on. The predictions that come next are the ones that make you go quiet. They are the ones where the explanation does not come as easily, where the coincidence is so specific, so precisely timed, or so deeply strange that the comfortable word coincidence starts to feel like it is doing a lot of work. The most famous prediction Family Guy ever made, the one that gets cited more than any other when people discuss the show's apparent ability to see the future, involves Caitlyn Jenner. In the Season 7 episode We Love You, Conrad, which aired on May 3rd, 2009, Brian discovers that his ex-girlfriend Gillian, voiced by Drew Barrymore, is getting married. In the course of the episode, Brian briefly dates reality television personality Lauren Conrad, who voices herself. When Brian and Stewie visit the set of The Hills, the MTV reality show, they encounter Brody Jenner. This is a real person, the son of the athlete who was then known as Bruce Jenner, and the television personality Kris Jenner. When Stewie sees Brody, he makes a comment. He says he cannot believe that Brody Jenner came out of Bruce Jenner. Brian, hearing this, corrects Stewie on Bruce Jenner's gender, because the comment is phrased in a way that is slightly ambiguous. Stewie responds by telling Brian that Bruce Jenner is an elegant, beautiful Dutch woman. He says this with complete confidence. He says it as if it is an obvious fact that everyone should already know. In 2009, when this episode aired, Bruce Jenner was publicly known as a male former Olympic gold medalist. He had won the men's decathlon at the 1976 Summer Olympics in Montreal. He was widely regarded as one of the great American athletes of his generation. His public image was built on traditional masculinity and athletic achievement. The idea that Bruce Jenner would identify as female was, to the vast majority of the American public, unthinkable. But Family Guy said it, directly, clearly, and without ambiguity. Stewie called Bruce Jenner a beautiful woman in 2009, 6 years before the public announcement. The show revisited the subject again in the Season 10 premiere, Lottery Fever, which aired on September 25th, 2011. In this episode, Peter wins $150 million in the lottery and begins spending extravagantly. At one point, he hires Bruce Jenner to perform a dance routine for Navy SEALs. The scene depicts Jenner performing a flamboyant, feminine burlesque number for the sailors. Peter introduces the performance by saying he just wants to remind the men what they're fighting for. The humour of the scene is built entirely around the contrast between Jenner's public image as a masculine former athlete and the feminine, seductive performance shown in the cartoon. 2 years after that episode aired, in 2013, reports began to surface about Jenner's evolving appearance and what it might signify. And then, in April of 2015, in an interview with Diane Sawyer that was watched by nearly 17 million people, Jenner publicly confirmed that she was a transgender woman. She said that for all intents and purposes, she was a woman. She later adopted the name Caitlyn Jenner. The announcement was one of the most significant moments in the history of transgender visibility in mainstream American culture. Family Guy had been making jokes about this very thing for 6 years. 2 separate episodes from 2 different seasons had directly and explicitly referenced the idea that Bruce Jenner was, in some fundamental sense, female. Not subtly, not through vague implication, through specific dialogue that described Jenner as a woman, years before the rest of the world knew. Collider, in its 2022 analysis of Family Guy predictions that came true, described the Jenner prediction as likely the most accurate prediction to come from Family Guy, and it is easy to see why. This was not a vague overlap, This was not a situation where you had to squint and tilt your head to see the connection. The show said Bruce Jenner is a woman. Bruce Jenner came out as a woman. The prediction was direct, specific, and correct. The question of how the writers knew has been the subject of significant discussion. Seth MacFarlane, speaking at the 2018 TCA press tour, was asked about the Jenner jokes, among others. He gave the same general answer he gave about all of the predictions, that the writers work with swirling rumours and that the show makes topical jokes the same way other comedy shows do. The implication was that rumours about Jenner's gender identity had been circulating in certain circles long before the public announcement. Bored Panda, in its coverage of cartoon predictions that came true, noted that the show's creators declined to comment further on why they chose to portray Jenner the way they did. The Jenner prediction sits in a complicated space because of this context. On one hand, it was clearly based on something the writers had heard. Rumours about Jenner's gender identity had existed in certain parts of the entertainment world for years. MacFarlane's explanation that the writers were responding to something that was in the air is probably accurate. On the other hand, the specificity of it, the directness of Stewie calling Jenner a woman with absolute certainty, the visual depiction of Jenner performing feminine routines, goes beyond simply acknowledging a rumour. The show committed to the premise completely. It did not hedge. It did not treat it as a maybe. It stated it as fact, in the voice of a character who is consistently portrayed as the most perceptive and intelligent member of the Griffin family. Whether you consider this an insider knowledge prediction, like the Hollywood scandals, or something that edges into genuine prescience, depends on how you evaluate the rumours that were circulating at the time. If you believe the rumours were widespread enough that many people in Hollywood had essentially already arrived at the conclusion that Jenner would eventually transition, then the prediction falls into the same category as Spacey and Ratner. An open secret turned into a joke that preceded the official announcement. If you believe the rumours were more marginal, more speculative, more uncertain, then the show's willingness to commit so fully to the premise starts to feel like something more than just passing along gossip. Either way, it is the single most frequently cited example of Family Guy predicting the future, and it remains, by almost any measure, the most direct and most specific prediction the show has ever produced. The second prediction in this category is one that is harder to talk about, not because the facts are complicated, but because the subject it involves is painful. It involves the death of Robin Williams. In the Season 10 episode Viewer Mail number 2, which aired on May 20th, 2012, the episode is structured as a trio of stories framed as viewer mail that Brian and Stewie are reading and responding to. One of the 3 segments is called Fat Man and Robin. In this segment, Peter makes a wish that everyone in Quahog would turn into Robin Williams. His wish is granted. At first, Peter is delighted. Robin Williams was one of the most beloved and energetic performers in American history. His comedy was built on an almost superhuman ability to improvise, to shift between characters, to flood a room with energy and voices and physical comedy at a pace that left audiences breathless. The idea of a world full of Robin Williamses sounds initially like a dream for someone like Peter, but the novelty wears off quickly. As every person in Quahog becomes Robin Williams, the constant, overwhelming, inescapable presence of that energy becomes unbearable. Peter is surrounded at all times by the manic, hyperactive, never-stopping personality of Robin Williams, and it drives him to a breaking point. The episode depicts Peter being driven to such despair by the constant presence of Williams that he tries to make it stop permanently. The implication of the scene is dark. Peter, overwhelmed by the ceaseless energy of Robin Williams in every direction, reaches a point where he wants to end things. The episode aired on May 20th, 2012. It was reviewed as a typical Family Guy installment. The Fat Man and Robin segment was noted as an extended celebrity parody, the kind of thing the show did regularly. Nobody assigned it any particular significance beyond its entertainment value. On August 11th, 2014, 2 years after the episode aired, Robin Williams Hiker died. He was 63 years old. His death was ruled a suicide. In the months that followed, it was revealed that Williams had been suffering from Lewy body dementia, a progressive brain disease that was causing him severe depression, anxiety, and cognitive decline. His wife, Susan Schneider Williams, later wrote extensively about the disease and its impact on her husband in the final year of his life. She described a man who was slowly losing his ability to be the person he had always been, a man trapped inside a body and a mind that were failing him in ways that medicine could not yet fully explain. The Family Guy episode did not predict the specifics of Williams's illness or the cause of his death. It did not reference Lewy body dementia. It did not describe the real circumstances of what happened. What it did was construct a scenario in which the unrelenting, inescapable nature of Robin Williams' energy, the very thing that had made him beloved, becomes the thing that drives someone to want to end things. It associated Williams's name with a narrative about reaching a point where the person cannot take it anymore. And that association, created as dark comedy in 2012, became unbearably poignant in 2014, when the real Robin Williams reached a breaking point that no one outside his immediate circle knew he was approaching. There is an additional detail about this prediction that makes it even more unsettling. Multiple sources, including WatchMojo and Ranker, have documented that the same episode, Viewer Mail Number 2, aired in the United Kingdom on the same day that Robin Williams died. The exact same episode that depicted a scenario built around the overwhelming, inescapable nature of Williams' presence, ending in someone wanting to make it stop permanently, was broadcast to British audiences on August 11th, 2014, the day the real Robin Williams was found dead. This is almost certainly a coincidence of television scheduling. Episodes air on different dates in different countries. The UK broadcast schedule for American shows does not align with the US schedule, and the overlap between the air date and the date of death is almost certainly the result of the UK being in a different point in the show's broadcast rotation. But the fact that it happened, the fact that British viewers could have been watching Peter try to make Robin Williams stop, while the real Robin Williams was being pronounced dead, is the kind of detail that makes the word coincidence feel insufficient even when it is almost certainly the correct explanation. MacFarlane, who knew Williams personally and who had expressed public admiration for him on multiple occasions, has not specifically addressed the Williams prediction in the same way he addressed the Spacey and Jenner predictions. The subject is more sensitive. The prediction is more painful. It does not involve a scandal or a public figure's private life being revealed. It involves death, and specifically the kind of death that carries enormous weight and sadness for millions of people who grew up watching Williams perform. What the Williams prediction reveals about Family Guy's relationship with the future is different from the Hollywood scandal predictions. Spacey, Ratner, Rose, and DeGeneres were cases where the writers knew something specific and turned it into comedy. The Jenner prediction was a case where the writers were responding to rumours that turned out to be true. The Williams prediction is something else entirely. There's no evidence that anyone on the Family Guy writing staff knew that Robin Williams was struggling with a brain disease. There is no reason to believe they had any information about his mental state or his health. The episode was not based on a rumour. It was based on the concept of Robin Williams as a cultural figure, on his public persona of boundless energy, and on the hypothetical question of what would happen if that energy were inescapable. The fact that this hypothetical question, explored as comedy, ended up touching on something real and devastating about the actual person behind the persona is the kind of thing that defies comfortable explanation. It is not insider knowledge. It is not an open secret. It is a coincidence that is so thematically aligned with what actually happened that calling it a coincidence feels almost like a failure of language. It is the kind of prediction that makes you sit quietly for a moment and wonder whether there are things that comedy can see that other forms of expression cannot. Whether the act of making a joke about someone, of pushing their defining characteristics to their most extreme logical conclusion, can sometimes arrive at a truth about that person that nobody was looking for and nobody wanted to find. These two predictions, Jenner and Williams, occupy a different emotional space than everything that came before them. The Bitcoin joke was funny. The Manilow prediction was charming. The Spacey clip was shocking. But Jenner and Williams are something else. They are moments where a cartoon reached into the lives of real people and said something true about them before the truth was ready to be spoken. One was a truth about identity. The other was a truth about despair. And both of them sat on television for years disguised as punchlines before the world caught up and recognized them for what they actually were. The predictions that follow are no less strange, but they involve something different from celebrity revelations and personal tragedies. They involve death, timing, and the kind of coincidence that makes even the most rational person hesitate before saying the word luck. On November 24th, 2013, Family Guy aired the season 12 episode Life of Brian. It was the 6th episode of that season. It was written by Alex Carter and directed by Joseph Lee. And in the episode, Brian Griffin, the martini-drinking, intellectually pretentious, deeply flawed but ultimately lovable dog who had been part of the show since its very first episode in 1999, was killed. He was struck by a car while playing street hockey with Stewie. He was rushed to the veterinarian. The family gathered around him. And Brian Griffin, one of the most iconic characters in the history of adult animation, a character who had been voiced by Seth MacFarlane himself across hundreds of episodes, died on screen while his family wept. The reaction from fans was immediate, intense, and overwhelmingly negative. Brian's death was treated as a genuine loss by a fan base that had grown deeply attached to the character over 14 years. People were angry. Petitions were circulated. Social media erupted. The show replaced Brian with a new dog named Vinny, a tough-talking Brooklyn type, voiced by Tony Sirico, and audiences did not accept the substitution. The backlash was so severe that the show reversed the death 2 episodes later in Christmas Guy, using time travel to undo the event and bring Brian back. But the story of Life of Brian did not end with the fan backlash or the time travel reversal. It ended 6 days later. In the real world, with a different Brian, on November 30th, 2013, 6 days after the episode aired, actor Paul Walker was killed in a high-speed car accident in Valencia, California. Walker was 40 years old. He was best known for playing Brian O'Connor in the Fast and Furious film franchise, a character defined by his love of cars and speed. Walker was a passenger in a Porsche Carrera GT, driven by his friend Roger Rodas, when the car crashed into a concrete lamppost and 2 trees at what authorities later determined was a speed significantly above the posted limit. Both Walker and Rodas died at the scene. 2 Brians, one fictional, one real, both killed in vehicle-related incidents, 6 days apart. In the same week of November 2013, the overlap was noticed almost immediately. Fans and media outlets pointed out the eerie timing. WatchMojo included it in their ranked list of times Family Guy predicted the future, noting that both Brians met their fate in the same week, and that while Brian Griffin ultimately came back because of time travel, all that could be done for Walker were some fitting and emotional tributes, both in the film Furious 7 and later on Family Guy itself. Now, it is important to be clear about what this prediction is and what it is not. Family Guy did not predict that Paul Walker would die in a car crash. The episode does not reference Walker or the Fast and Furious franchise. Brian Griffin is not a stand-in for Paul Walker in any intentional way. The character of Brian Griffin had been part of the show since 1999, long before anyone was thinking about connections to a character in a car racing franchise. The overlap is entirely a matter of timing. A fictional character named Brian died in a vehicle accident on November 24th. A real person who played a character named Brian died in a vehicle accident on November 30th. That is the full extent of the connection. But timing, in the context of these predictions, is the whole point. Nobody is suggesting that the Family Guy writers deliberately planned the overlap. Nobody is claiming that killing Brian Griffin was a coded message about Paul Walker. What people are responding to when they cite this as a prediction is the uncanny specificity of the coincidence. Same week, same cause, same name. In a show that had already accumulated a reputation for appearing to predict real-world events, this particular overlap hit differently. It felt like the universe was underlining something, even though there was nothing rational to underline. Family Guy later acknowledged Walker's death in the show, paying tribute to the real actor and his contributions to entertainment. Brian Griffin was brought back to life in the show's next holiday special. But the week in November 2013, when both Brians died, remains one of the most frequently discussed overlaps between the show and reality, and one of the hardest to explain away, even though the explanation, pure coincidence of timing, is almost certainly correct. The next prediction involves the death of a Supreme Court justice and a hunting trip. In the Season 5 episode Meet the Quagmires, which aired on May 20th, 2007, Peter Griffin is given the opportunity to go back in time to 1984 by the character of Death. The episode is one of Family Guy's time travel stories, a format the show returned to multiple times across its run. During the time travel sequence, Death tells Brian about events that have happened or will happen in the altered timeline. Among the things Death mentions is that Vice President Dick Cheney has shot and killed several people, including Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia. This was a reference to a real event. On February 11th, 2006, a little over a year before the Family Guy episode aired, Dick Cheney had accidentally shot his friend, Harry Whittington, during a quail hunting trip in Texas. Whittington survived, but the incident became one of the most widely covered and parodied moments of the George W. Bush administration. The Family Guy joke took the real hunting accident and escalated it for comedic effect, imagining Cheney's poor aim extending to more significant targets, including a Supreme Court justice. At the time, the joke was straightforward, dark political humour. Cheney shot someone while hunting. Family Guy imagined him shooting more people, including a justice. The specific mention of Scalia was almost certainly random, chosen because Scalia was one of the more recognisable and politically prominent members of the Supreme Court at the time. 9 years later, on February 13th, 2016, Antonin Scalia died at the age of 79. His death was attributed to natural causes, but the circumstances surrounding the discovery of his death added an unusual layer to the story. Scalia was found dead at Cibolo Creek Ranch in Texas. He had been at the ranch on a trip, and the day before his death, he had been on the ranch's grounds, where others were quail hunting. Family Guy had associated Scalia's death with hunting. The real Scalia died on a ranch where hunting was taking place, the day after a hunting excursion. The cause of death was different. The show imagined him being shot, while reality attributed his death to natural causes, but the connection between Scalia, death, and a hunting environment was present in both the fiction and the reality. Ranker and Watch Mojo both covered this prediction, noting that while Family Guy did not get the cause right, the combination of the correct person and the hunting connection made the overlap more specific than a purely random guess would suggest. The show named a specific Supreme Court justice. That justice died 9 years later in circumstances that involved hunting. The details do not match perfectly, but they match well enough to sit uncomfortably alongside the show's other predictions. The next prediction involves global geopolitics and a scene that went viral in early 2022. In the Season 8 episode, Spies Reminiscent of Us, which aired in 2009, Brian and Stewie find themselves on a mission that takes them to Russia. During the episode, they come face to face with Vladimir Putin, who at the time was serving as Prime Minister of Russia. Putin is depicted in the episode in a very specific way. He pulls out a series of weapons, one after another, each of which appears threatening. But each time the weapon turns out to be used for something completely harmless. A baton becomes a coat hanger. A crossbow fires an arrow into the wall to hang his tie from. A machine gun turns out to be a cigarette lighter. The pattern is clear. Putin presents himself as dangerous, builds tension, and then deflects into something innocuous, over and over again. The scene was a joke about Putin's public image, the way he cultivated an aura of strongman intimidation, while simultaneously positioning himself as a reasonable partner on the world stage. In 2009, this was a comedic observation about a political figure's persona. It was funny, it was sharp, and it was, for most viewers, quickly forgotten. In February of 2022, Russian troops massed on the border of Ukraine. The build-up had been going on for months. Tensions between Russia and the West were escalating rapidly. Putin made public statements suggesting that Russia was not planning to invade, that the troop movements were exercises, that the situation was being managed diplomatically. Western leaders, including the President of the United States and the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, publicly expressed skepticism. They said the intelligence they were seeing did not match Putin's assurances. On February 24, 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine. In the days leading up to the invasion, while the world was watching the troop build-up and trying to determine whether Putin would actually follow through, someone posted the Family Guy clip from Spies Reminiscent of Us on Twitter with the caption, "Putin's Ukraine Strategy." The clip went viral almost immediately. Tens of millions of people watched it. News outlets, including joe.co.uk and Yahoo News, covered the clip's resurgence, noting the eerie parallels between the cartoon Putin presenting weapons that turned out to be harmless and the real Putin making assurances about peace while positioning his military for an invasion. The cartoon Putin escalated tension and then deflected. The real Putin escalated tension and then invaded. The show got the behavioural pattern right, even if the outcome was different. It captured something real about how Putin operated, the way he used tension and the appearance of restraint as tools, years before that pattern played out on the world stage in a way that changed the course of European history. The Putin prediction is different from the others because it is less about a specific event and more about a behavioural pattern. Family Guy did not predict the invasion of Ukraine. It predicted, or more accurately observed, the way Putin presented himself to the world, and that observation turned out to be a remarkably accurate framework for understanding what happened 13 years later. The show identified the strategy. The world saw the strategy deployed in real time. The gap between the observation and its real-world confirmation was over a decade, but the observation held up. There is one more prediction in this category that is worth covering before we move on, though it is more of a stretch than the others and should be presented as such. In an episode that has been cited by multiple outlets, including WatchMojo in their expanded top 20 list, Stewie is shown dealing with the pitfalls of early fame. Brian pulls out a chart that tracks the fates of various famous former celebrities, organised by outcomes. The chart shows categories including those who died and those whose careers took dark turns. On the chart, the abbreviations RIP and XXX appear close together. Some internet users associated the proximity of those abbreviations with the rapper XXXTentacion, whose stage name contained the same 3 letters. XXXTentacion, whose real name was Jasse Onfroy, was shot and killed on June 18, 2018, at the age of 20. He was murdered during a robbery in Deerfield Beach, Florida. His death shocked the music world, and in the aftermath, fans who remembered the Family Guy chart pointed to the proximity of R.I.P. and XXX as another example of the show foreshadowing a real event. This one requires significantly more interpretive work than the other predictions. The chart in the episode is not about rappers, it is about former celebrities. The XXX on the chart refers to a category of outcome, not to a musician's stage name. The connection between the chart and XXXTentacion's death requires you to extract two abbreviations from their original context, associate them with a completely different person in a completely different industry, and treat their proximity on a fictional chart as a prediction of a real murder that occurred years later. It is a stretch, but it is included in multiple published lists of Family Guy predictions, and enough people have drawn the connection that it has become part of the broader conversation about the show's apparent prescience. The honest assessment is that this one is almost certainly a complete coincidence, one that relies on the human tendency to find patterns in unrelated data points. But in the context of a list where many of the other entries are genuinely difficult to dismiss, even the weaker connections take on a different quality. They become part of a cumulative effect where each additional overlap, however tenuous, adds to the overall sense that something unusual is happening. And that cumulative effect is part of what makes the Family Guy prediction phenomenon so compelling. No single prediction, on its own, is inexplicable. Each one can be accounted for by some combination of insider knowledge, cultural observation, statistical probability, and pure coincidence. But when you lay them all out, end to end, when you see prediction after prediction after prediction stacking up across 25 years of television, the combined weight of all those individual explanations starts to feel less convincing than the sum of the moments themselves. That weight is something you feel most acutely with the prediction that comes next. It is the darkest, the most controversial, and the most consequential moment in the entire history of Family Guy's relationship with reality. It is the only prediction that caused an episode to be permanently pulled from circulation. It is the only prediction that involved real violence, real casualties, and real grief on a massive scale. And it happened less than a month after the episode aired. There are moments in the history of television where the distance between entertainment and reality collapses so completely that the entertainment can no longer exist in its original form, where something that was created as fiction becomes so entangled with something real that the fiction has to be withdrawn, not because it caused anything, not because it is responsible for anything, but because its continued existence in the world feels wrong in a way that no one can fully articulate, but everyone can feel. The season 11 episode Turban Cowboy is one of those moments. The episode aired on March 17th, 2013. It was a Sunday night. Family Guy was in its 11th season, well past the point where the show's formula was fully established and familiar to its audience. The episode followed the same general structure that hundreds of Family Guy episodes before it had followed. Peter gets into a situation. Things escalate. There are cutaway gags. There is a resolution of some kind at the end. Nothing about the format was unusual. The central plot of Turban Cowboy follows Peter befriending a Muslim man named MacLeod. The episode explores what happens when Peter, who is not known for his cultural sensitivity or his ability to read situations accurately, is gradually drawn into a world he does not understand. Through a series of events that escalate in the way that Family Guy plots typically escalate, Peter unwittingly becomes involved with a group that is planning to bomb the Quahog Bridge. Peter does not understand what is happening. He is not a willing participant. He is being manipulated because he is Peter. And being manipulated due to his own obliviousness is something that has happened to him in various forms across the entire run of the show. The terrorism plot is the main story of the episode. It is the thread that drives the narrative from beginning to end. But it is not the part of the episode that became infamous. The part that became infamous is a cutaway gag that has nothing to do with the main plot. It is a separate moment, disconnected from the terrorism storyline, that appears during the episode and lasts only a few seconds. In the cutaway, Peter claims that he once won the Boston Marathon. A flashback shows how he won it. He drove his car through the crowd of runners, ploughing through them at speed, using his vehicle to mow down the other participants in order to cross the finish line first. It is a dark visual. It is the kind of extreme, violent, absurd gag that Family Guy had been producing for years. Peter doing something terrible and physically destructive for a trivially selfish reason was a joke format the show had used hundreds of times. The specificity of the Boston Marathon was notable, mainly because the show is set in New England. Quahog, Rhode Island, is geographically close to Boston. References to Boston and New England culture had been part of the show since the beginning. The episode aired on March 17th, 2013. Less than 1 month later, on April 15th, 2013, 2 homemade pressure cooker bombs detonated near the finish line of the Boston Marathon. 3 people were killed: Crystal Campbell, 29 years old, Lu Lingzi, a 23-year-old graduate student from China, Martin Richard, 8 years old. Over 260 people were injured. The bombs were placed in backpacks and left on the sidewalk near the finish line, in the area where spectators gathered to watch runners complete the race. The explosions occurred approximately 12 seconds apart. The scene was captured by multiple cameras, and the footage was broadcast around the world within minutes. The bombing was carried out by brothers Dzhokhar and Tamerlan Tsarnaev. In the days following the attack, during the manhunt that locked down the entire city of Boston, Tamerlan Tsarnaev was killed in a confrontation with police. Dzhokhar Tsarnaev was captured hiding in a boat in a residential backyard in Watertown, Massachusetts. He was later convicted and sentenced to death, though his sentence has been subject to legal proceedings since. The proximity between the Family Guy episode and the real event was immediate and shocking. An episode that featured Peter driving through runners at the Boston Marathon had aired on national television less than 30 days before real bombs detonated at the Boston Marathon finish line. The coincidence was so close in time and so specific in location that the overlap could not be ignored by anyone who had seen both the episode and the news coverage. And then the situation got worse. In the days following the bombing, an edited video clip began circulating on the internet. The clip was a hoax. It had been deliberately altered to make it appear that a single scene from the episode depicted Peter using a mobile phone to detonate a bomb after driving through the marathon runners. The edited clip combined 2 separate scenes from the episode, the marathon cutaway and a scene from the terrorism subplot, and stitched them together to create a sequence that did not exist in the actual episode. The fake clip made it look like Family Guy had depicted a character detonating a bomb at the Boston Marathon, which is not what happened. The marathon cutaway and the terrorism plot were entirely separate elements of the episode. They were not connected in the actual broadcast, but the hoax clip went viral before the clarification could catch up with it. Millions of people saw a version of the episode that did not actually exist and believed that Family Guy had somehow depicted the exact event that had just killed 3 people and injured hundreds. The response was swift, confused, angry, and enormous. Fox took immediate action. The episode was pulled from Hulu and from Fox's own website. Fox released a statement making clear that the 2 scenes in the viral clip were from separate parts of the episode, and that no single scene in the episode depicted a character detonating a bomb at the marathon. The network also stated that the episode would not air in future reruns. Turban Cowboy was effectively removed from circulation. It became one of Family Guy's banned episodes, joining a very short list that includes Partial Terms of Endearment, a Season 8 episode about abortion that Fox refused to air in the United States and that remains available only on DVD. the actual overlap between the episode and the real event, stripped of the hoax clip's distortion, is this. Family Guy aired a cutaway showing Peter driving through runners at the Boston Marathon. Less than a month later, bombs were detonated at the Boston Marathon, killing 3 and injuring over 260. Separately, in the same episode, Peter was involved in a terrorism plot. The terrorism plot and the marathon cutaway were not connected in the episode, but they existed in the same 22 minutes of television. And when the real event happened, the presence of both elements in the same episode created a proximity that felt deeply disturbing, even though the show had not depicted anything resembling the actual bombing. It is worth being precise about what this prediction is and what it is not. Family Guy did not predict the Boston Marathon bombing. The show did not depict an explosion at the marathon. The show did not depict a terrorist attack at the marathon. The show depicted Peter cheating at the marathon by driving his car through the runners, which is a different thing entirely. The terrorism subplot was about a bridge in Quahog, not about the marathon. The two elements were separate, but the human mind does not process separate elements of the same episode as separate when something real and terrible connects them. When a viewer sees an episode that contains both a violent scene set at the Boston Marathon and a terrorism plot, and then 29 days later hears that bombs went off at the Boston Marathon, the brain does not maintain a clean separation between the two plot lines. It compresses them, it connects them, it sees a pattern even when the show did not intend one. That compression is what made the turban cowboy situation so explosive and so painful. The episode became, in the public imagination, something it was not. The hoax clip amplified the misunderstanding to an enormous scale, and Fox, recognizing that the episode could not exist in the world without being continually associated with the real event, made the decision to remove it from circulation. There is also something worth noting about the geographic dimension of this overlap that connects to a detail mentioned earlier. Family Guy is set in Quahog, Rhode Island. New England is the show's home territory. The Boston Marathon is one of the most significant annual events in New England. For a show rooted in that specific part of the country to make a joke involving the Boston Marathon is not unusual or surprising. It would be more surprising if Family Guy had never referenced the marathon across 20+ seasons of television set in its geographic backyard. The specificity of the reference, a violent scene at the Boston Marathon, is what creates the overlap. But the fact that the reference exists at all is a natural consequence of the show's setting. A show set in the Pacific Northwest might reference the Seattle Marathon. A show set in the Midwest might reference the Chicago Marathon. Family Guy referenced the Boston Marathon because Boston is part of the world the show inhabits. The violence of the cutaway is a function of the show's house style, where Peter regularly does extreme things in every context the show puts him in. Put those two things together, the New England setting and the extreme comedy style, and a violent Boston Marathon gag is not just possible, but practically inevitable across a long enough timeline. None of that rationalization makes the overlap less uncomfortable, but it does help explain how the overlap happened without anyone at the show intending to predict or reference anything remotely resembling the real event. The show made a New England joke with a violent punchline. Reality produced a New England tragedy with real violence. The timing made the connection impossible to ignore. The hoax clip made the connection seem even closer than it was, and the combined weight of all of it forced the episode out of existence. Turban Cowboy is the only Family Guy prediction that resulted in an episode being pulled from circulation. It is the only one that involved a real event where people were killed and hundreds were injured. It is the only one where the show had to actively distance itself from the overlap rather than acknowledge it with a wink or a shrug. And it is, by a significant margin, the most consequential intersection between Family Guy's fiction and the real world. MacFarlane did not specifically address the turban cowboy situation at the 2018 TCA press tour in the same way he addressed the Spacey and Jenner predictions. The subject is different in kind. You can talk about predicting a celebrity scandal with a certain lightness. You cannot talk about the proximity between a cartoon and a terrorist attack the same way. The weight of what happened in Boston, the loss of life, the hundreds of injuries, the trauma that continues to affect survivors and the families of the victims, places the Turban Cowboy episode in a category that the other predictions do not occupy. It is the prediction that nobody wants to claim, the one that sits in an uncomfortable silence, the one that demonstrates most clearly that when a show produces enough content over enough years, the overlaps with reality are not always amusing or fascinating or charming. Sometimes they are painful, sometimes they touch something that comedy was never meant to touch, and sometimes the only appropriate response is to remove the thing from the world and let the silence speak for itself. After the weight of that particular intersection between fiction and reality, it would be understandable to want to stop, to say that the list of predictions has reached its natural end, that anything else would feel trivial by comparison. But there is one more. And while it does not carry the same gravity as the Boston Marathon overlap, it is, in its own way, one of the most remarkable things Family Guy ever inadvertently predicted, because it did not foresee a single event. It foresaw an entire global experience, a crisis that would affect every person on the planet, a scenario that, when it actually happened, played out almost exactly the way a cartoon had depicted it 4 years earlier, and it happened because a bat flew into the Griffin family's living room. Season 15, Episode 6, Hot Shots. It aired in 2016, and when you watch it now, knowing what happened to the world 4 years later, it feels less like an episode of television and more like a dress rehearsal. The episode begins simply enough. A bat gets into the Griffin family's house. Peter, in his usual style, tries to handle the situation himself. His efforts to remove the bat are characteristically clumsy and destructive. In the process of dealing with the bat, Stewie is injured. The family takes Stewie to the hospital. At the hospital, the doctors offer to give Stewie his vaccinations. This is a normal, routine part of a child's medical care. But Lois, while reading the paperwork that accompanies the vaccinations, notices the section listing potential side effects. She reads further. She goes online and finds forums and communities where parents are sharing negative experiences and concerns about vaccinations. The more she reads, the more alarmed she becomes. She digs in her heels. She decides she does not want Stewie to be vaccinated. Peter, following Lois's lead, as he often does when she feels strongly about something, goes along with her decision. Brian objects. He argues that the science supports vaccination. He presents the case clearly and directly. He points out that the fears Lois has developed from reading internet comments are not supported by medical evidence, but Lois and Peter are not persuaded. They have made their decision, and they're committed to it. What happens next is where the episode starts to feel uncomfortably prophetic. Peter and Lois do not simply decline to vaccinate their own child. They go further. They host an anti-vaccination rally. They take their personal decision and turn it into a public campaign. They advocate for other parents to follow their lead and refuse vaccinations for their children as well. And the campaign works. Parents across Quahog are persuaded. Vaccination rates begin to drop. Brian watches all of this with growing alarm. He continues to argue the other side. He tries to reach Stewie directly, warning him about the dangers of being unprotected against infectious diseases. But the tide has turned in Quahog. The anti-vaccination movement Peter and Lois started has taken hold. It is no longer just the Griffin family making a personal choice. It is a community-wide shift away from the medical consensus, driven by fear, amplified by social media, and sustained by the emotional appeal of parents who believe they are protecting their children by rejecting established medical practices. Then the outbreak happens. At Stewie's daycare, the children begin getting sick. The diagnosis is measles, a disease that vaccination had largely controlled for decades. The unvaccinated children are vulnerable, and the disease spreads rapidly. The outbreak is severe enough that the entire town of Quahog is placed under quarantine. Nobody can leave. Nobody can enter. The town is sealed off until the disease can be brought under control. Brian points out that this is exactly what he warned would happen. The connection between the declining vaccination rates and the outbreak is direct and obvious. The quarantine is a consequence of the community's collective decision to reject the medical advice that would have prevented exactly this scenario. But the situation continues to deteriorate. Peter, who has been one of the primary advocates against vaccination throughout the episode, destroys the town's remaining supply of vaccines. This is Peter at his most destructive and oblivious. He does not destroy the vaccines out of malice. He does it because he is Peter. Because Peter does things without thinking about the consequences. Because the show needed the situation to get worse before it could get better, and Peter's impulsive behaviour is the tool the writers have always used to push situations to their breaking point. Lois, watching the quarantine and the suffering it is causing, has a change of heart. She decides she does want Stewie vaccinated after all, but the vaccines are gone. Peter destroyed them. The episode has backed the characters into a corner where the right decision has finally been made, but the ability to act on it has been removed. Stewie, terrified of getting sick, runs from the house. Lois panics. The family searches for him. In a sequence that involves Stewie running into his future self, who turns out to be there for unrelated and characteristically absurd reasons, the episode arrives at its resolution through the intervention of Sean Penn, who appears and delivers vaccinations for the town. Lois is lukewarm to Penn's involvement, noting his liberal Hollywood leanings, but accepts the help because there is no other option. The episode ends with the family counting their blessings, but it also acknowledges in a final beat before the credits that approximately 150 people died during the crisis. The bat that started everything returns for a final comment aimed at Peter. That was 2016. In early 2020, reports began emerging from Wuhan, China, about a novel coronavirus that was spreading rapidly and causing severe respiratory illness. Within weeks, the virus had reached multiple countries. By March of 2020, the World Health Organization declared the outbreak a global pandemic. COVID-19 would go on to infect hundreds of millions of people worldwide and kill millions. Economies shut down, schools closed, hospitals were overwhelmed, entire nations went into lockdown, and at the center of the public response to the pandemic, just as it had been at the center of the Family Guy episode 4 years earlier, was the debate over vaccination. When vaccines for COVID-19 were developed and made available in late 2020 and early 2021, the response was not universal relief. Instead, a significant portion of the population in the United States and in countries around the world resisted vaccination. The arguments against the COVID vaccines echoed, almost word for word, the arguments that Lois made in Hot Shots. Concerns about side effects, distrust of medical institutions, information from online forums and social media that contradicted the mainstream medical consensus. Parents who believed they were protecting their children by refusing a treatment that the overwhelming majority of medical professionals recommended. The quarantine cycle that played out in Quahog in 2016 played out globally in 2020 and 2021. Outbreaks occurred, lockdowns were imposed, people argued about whether the lockdowns were necessary, vaccination campaigns were launched and immediately met with resistance. The resistance extended the pandemic. The extended pandemic created more suffering, more economic damage, more division. The cycle of outbreak, quarantine, vaccination debate, and continued resistance that Family Guy had depicted in a single 22-minute episode played out across the entire planet over the course of years. Family Guy did not predict COVID-19 specifically. The episode does not mention a coronavirus. The outbreak in Quahog is measles, not a novel respiratory virus. The mechanism of transmission is different. The scale is different. The specifics are different in almost every meaningful way. But the social mechanics are identical. A disease spreads because people refuse vaccination. The refusal is driven by fear, amplified by online misinformation, and sustained by community leaders who embrace the anti-vaccination position for emotional rather than scientific reasons. The resulting outbreak leads to quarantine. The quarantine affects everyone, not just the people who refuse the vaccine. The debate about vaccination becomes a social and political flashpoint that divides the community, and by the time the crisis is resolved, real harm has been done that could have been prevented if the medical consensus had been followed from the beginning. That is what Hot Shots depicted in 2016, and that is what the world experienced beginning in 2020. The episode captured the entire social and political cycle of a pandemic response, including the anti-vaccination movement, the quarantine, the political arguments, and the preventable deaths 4 years before any of it became the daily reality for 8 billion people. Watch Mojo included Hot Shots in their ranking of times Family Guy predicted the future, noting that while the anti-vaccination crowd certainly predated COVID-19, it was still remarkable to see that the show predicted the cycle of quarantines and vaccination refusals that extended the pandemic across large parts of the world. Sportskeeda's analysis of the episode noted that while many shows featured pandemic or disease outbreak storylines, Family Guy managed to capture the socio-political scenario that a disease brings with it, the human dimension of how a society responds to a health crisis, in a way that was unusually prescient. The Hot Shots prediction is different from the others in an important way. Most of the predictions we have covered tonight are about specific events or specific people. Spacey was accused, Jenner transitioned, Williams died, the marathon was bombed. Those are discrete moments, points on a timeline that either match or do not match what the show depicted. Hot Shots is not about a moment. It is about a process. It predicted not a single event, but an entire chain of events. A sequence of cause and effect that played out across months and years in the real world. Disease leads to fear. Fear leads to rejection of the medical response. Rejection leads to wider spread. Wider spread leads to quarantine. Quarantine leads to political division. Division leads to more suffering than the disease alone would have caused. The show saw that chain clearly in 2016, and it saw it because the elements of that chain were already present in American culture at the time. The anti-vaccination movement was real and growing. The influence of online misinformation on health decisions was increasing. The political polarization of medical issues was already visible. What Family Guy did was take those existing elements and follow them to their logical conclusion, which turned out to be exactly the conclusion that reality followed 4 years later. That is perhaps the most important thing to understand about this particular prediction. It was not a guess. It was not a lucky coincidence. It was a reasonably logical projection of existing trends, made through the lens of comedy, that turned out to be accurate because the trends it identified continued moving in the direction they were already headed. The show did not see the future. It saw the present clearly, and in seeing the present clearly, it inadvertently described the future, because the future was already contained in the present if you knew where to look. That may be the truest thing that can be said about all of Family Guy's predictions. Not that the show has some mysterious ability to see what has not happened yet, but that comedy, when it is doing its job well, sees the present with a clarity that other forms of expression sometimes do not. It takes what is already true and pushes it to its logical extreme. It follows the thread to the end, and sometimes the end of the thread turns out to be exactly where reality was headed all along. There is a moment that tends to happen when you have been going through a list like this for a while. a moment where the individual predictions stop feeling individual and start feeling like parts of a single, larger phenomenon. That moment is worth paying attention to because it tells you something about the difference between looking at these predictions one at a time and looking at them all together. When you look at them one at a time, each prediction has its own explanation. Bitcoin was a trend that was already visible to anyone paying attention. MacLeod was an open secret that half the entertainment industry already knew about. Spacey and Ratner and Rose were industry whispers that found their way into a comedy writer's room. Jenner was a rumour that had been circulating in celebrity circles for years. Williams was a thematic coincidence. Walker was a timing coincidence. Scalia was a random name choice that turned out to be the right name in the wrong context. The Boston Marathon was a New England show making a New England joke at a terrible time. COVID was a logical projection of existing trends pushed to their extreme conclusion. Each one taken individually has a perfectly reasonable explanation that does not require anything beyond coincidence, cultural awareness, and volume. But when you line them all up, when you see them laid out end to end across 25 years of television, something shifts. The reasonable explanations do not stop being reasonable. They are still true individually. But the question changes from how did this one prediction happen to how did all of these predictions happen across the same show? The cumulative effect creates a feeling that the individual explanations do not fully account for, not because the explanations are wrong, but because the sheer number of correct or near correct predictions from a single source starts to exceed what the word coincidence can comfortably carry. This is the essence of the Family Guy prediction phenomenon. It is not any single moment, it is all of them. It is the weight of the full list pressing down on the very reasonable explanation that each item on the list is just a coincidence. The explanation holds for each item. It bends under the weight of all of them together. And that bending is what creates the fascination. There is a mathematical concept that is relevant here, and it is one that Alex Sulkin was pointing toward without using the formal language when he said a stopwatch is right twice a day. The concept is the law of large numbers. In simple terms, it says that when you produce a large enough number of events, even unlikely outcomes become probable. If you flip a coin 10 times, getting 10 heads in a row would be shocking. If you flip a coin 1,000,000 times, getting a run of 10 heads somewhere in that sequence is not just possible, it is statistically expected. Family Guy has produced over 447 episodes. Each episode contains multiple cutaway gags, pop culture references, celebrity jokes, and topical commentary. A conservative estimate would put the total number of specific cultural references the show has made across its run in the tens of thousands. When you produce tens of thousands of specific references to real people, real institutions, real events, and real cultural trends, the probability that some of those references will overlap with future events is not low. It is essentially guaranteed. The only question is how many overlaps will occur, not whether any will. This is the unsexy but statistically sound explanation for the Family Guy prediction phenomenon. It is the explanation that the show's own creators have offered and that academic analysts of coincidence and probability would likely endorse. The show makes a lot of jokes about a lot of things. Some of those things turn into real events. The ones that do get compiled into lists and go viral. The ones that do not are forgotten, and the result is a highlight reel of apparent predictions that looks much more impressive than the full record from which it was drawn. But here is what the statistical explanation does not fully account for. The quality of the matches. If the overlaps between Family Guy and reality were vague and approximate, the law of large numbers would explain them completely. If the show had said something general about a celebrity, and that celebrity later experienced an unrelated but loosely connectable event, that would be squarely within the bounds of statistical expectation. But some of the matches we have covered tonight are not vague. Stewie did not say something general about Bruce Jenner. He said Bruce Jenner is a woman. The show did not make a vague reference to Kevin Spacey being sketchy. It depicted a character fleeing from Spacey's home and screaming for help in a crowded public place. The COVID episode did not depict a general health scare. It depicted a specific chain of events: anti-vaccination rally, disease outbreak, quarantine, political division, preventable deaths that maps almost exactly onto what actually happened 4 years later. The specificity of the matches is what elevates the phenomenon beyond pure statistics. Vague overlaps are statistically expected. Specific overlaps are rarer. And the most specific predictions on this list, Jenner, Spacey, COVID, the Boston Marathon timing, are specific enough that they push against the comfortable boundaries of the statistical explanation, even while remaining technically within those boundaries. That tension between the explanation that makes rational sense and the feeling that the explanation does not quite cover everything is what gives the Family Guy prediction phenomenon its enduring power. The explanation is almost certainly correct. The feeling that it is not quite sufficient is also real, and the gap between those two things is where the fascination lives. It is also where something deeper lives, something about the nature of attention itself, about what it means to watch something closely enough and long enough that you start to see things in it that were not visible before, about the strange relationship between a piece of entertainment and the world it exists within, and how the boundaries between the two can blur when enough time passes and enough content accumulates. Family Guy has been part of the cultural background noise of American life for over a quarter century. It has been playing in dorm rooms and living rooms and on phones and tablets for so long that it has become part of the texture of how a generation processes the world around them. Its jokes are shared as memes, its references are used as shorthand. Its cutaway gags are the vocabulary of a specific kind of internet culture that treats everything as a reference and everything as a potential pattern. In that environment, a show that has been running this long does not just reflect reality, it becomes part of how reality is interpreted. When something happens in the real world, the first instinct of millions of people is to check whether Family Guy or The Simpsons already made a joke about it. The shows have become the lens through which a certain audience makes sense of current events. And that lens, once established, creates its own feedback loop. The more predictions people find, the more they look for predictions. The more they look, the more they find. And the more they find, the more the show's reputation as a predictor grows, which leads more people to look, which leads to more findings. It is a self-reinforcing cycle that would not exist without the internet's ability to search, compile, and share clips at scale. In the pre-internet era, if a Family Guy cutaway happened to overlap with a future event, the overlap might be noticed by a few dedicated fans and mentioned in a conversation or two. It would not go viral. It would not be compiled into ranked lists. It would not be the subject of news articles and YouTube videos and social media threads with millions of views. The internet turned what would have been scattered, isolated observations into a comprehensive, searchable, infinitely shareable archive of apparent predictions. And that archive, growing with each new edition, is what sustains the phenomenon. Whether you find that archive fascinating or overblown, whether you believe the predictions represent something genuinely strange or are simply the inevitable result of a show producing too much content for too long, the archive exists, it is real, it is growing, and it shows no signs of stopping, because the show shows no signs of stopping. Every new season of Family Guy is another opportunity for the archive to grow. Every new cutaway gag is another potential entry on the list. Every new joke about a public figure or a cultural trend or a political situation is another dart thrown at a board that grows larger every year. And somewhere on that board, right now, there is a joke that has already been written and has not yet come true. A joke sitting in a script or a storyboard or a recorded vocal track, ordinary and unremarkable, waiting for the world to catch up with it That joke does not know what it is yet. The person who wrote it does not know what it is yet. Nobody does. It is just a joke, a 5-second cutaway. A quick, dark reference to something that, at the time of writing, seemed like nothing more than a funny idea pitched late at night in a room full of tired comedy writers. And one day, weeks or months or years from now, that joke will become something else. It will become the next entry on the list, the next clip that goes viral, the next thing that makes millions of people look at a cartoon about a man named Peter Griffin and wonder, just for a moment, how a show about a family in Rhode Island keeps seeing things that the rest of the world has not noticed yet. Before we reach the end of this, there are a few more overlaps worth laying out. They are smaller than the ones we have just been through. They do not carry the weight of the Boston Marathon or the strangeness of the Robin Williams episode. But they are part of the full picture, and the full picture is what we came here to see. In Peter's second honeymoon episode, North by North Quahog, the season 4 premiere that aired on May 1st, 2005, the same episode that introduced the Passion of the Christ sequel joke, there is another detail worth noting. The episode was the first new Family Guy to air after the show's revival from cancellation. Seth MacFarlane wrote it himself. In the opening scene, Peter directly addresses the family and the audience about the show being cancelled, rattling off a list of Fox programmes that had aired and been cancelled during the 3 years Family Guy was off the air. It was a confident, self-aware return. But nestled inside that premiere, alongside the passion joke and the meta-humour about cancellation, was the revival of a show that had been brought back from the dead by an audience that refused to let it go. Over 2 million DVD copies sold, a 239% increase in Adult Swim's ratings when the reruns began airing in 2003. The show had been cancelled after 3 seasons because Fox moved it to a Thursday night time slot, where it went head-to-head with Friends, which at the time was drawing over 20 million viewers per week. Family Guy did not stand a chance in that matchup, but the audience that discovered it on Adult Swim and on DVD was a different audience, one that watched on their own terms, at their own hours, and in numbers that made the original cancellation look like a mistake the network could not afford to repeat. I mention this because it contextualizes something important about the show's relationship with prediction. Family Guy has always been a show that exists slightly outside the mainstream, even when it is enormously popular. Its audience found it through late-night reruns and DVD purchases, not through the traditional Sunday night viewing habits that sustained other shows. Its comedy style, the cutaway gag format, the willingness to reference anything and everything, the dark humour that pushed boundaries other shows would not approach, positioned it as a show that was paying attention to things the mainstream was not. And that positioning, that identity as a show that saw what other shows did not see and said what other shows would not say, is the soil from which the prediction phenomenon grew. A show that makes safe, mainstream, carefully vetted jokes about universally accepted subjects does not accidentally predict the future. It does not reference Kevin Spacey's private behaviour or Caitlyn Jenner's identity or the anti-vaccination movement's pandemic implications. It stays in the safe centre of the culture and makes jokes about things everyone already agrees on. Family Guy, from its earliest episodes, chose not to stay in that centre. It went to the edges. It referenced the uncomfortable. It turned whispers into punchlines. And sometimes those punchlines launched from the edges of the culture in the direction of targets that the mainstream had not yet focused on, landed in places that would not become visible to everyone else for years. There is a deeper question underneath all of this that is worth sitting with as we approach the end. The question is not whether Family Guy predicted the future. The show's own creators have been clear about that. They do not believe they are predicting anything. They believe they are making jokes based on the information available to them at the time, and that the sheer volume of those jokes, combined with the show's willingness to touch subjects that other shows avoid, creates a statistical inevitability that some of those jokes will overlap with future events. The deeper question is why it matters to us. Why do millions of people share these clips and compile these lists and argue about which predictions are real and which are stretches? Why does the idea of a cartoon predicting the future have such a powerful hold on the collective imagination? Why do we want it to be true even when we know, rationally, that it probably is not? Part of the answer is simple human pattern recognition. Our brains are wired to find connections. We evolved to notice patterns in our environment because identifying patterns was essential to survival. A rustle in the grass might be the wind, or it might be a predator, and the humans who assumed it was a predator and prepared accordingly survived more often than the ones who assumed it was the wind and ignored it. That same pattern recognition system, enormously useful in a world of physical threats, does not turn off when we are watching television. We see two things that resemble each other, a cartoon scene and a real event, and our brains automatically connect them. The connection feels meaningful even when it is statistically inevitable, because our brains are not built to evaluate statistical probability in real time. They are built to notice patterns and flag them as important, but there is something else going on beyond just pattern recognition. There is something about the specific nature of these predictions, the fact that they come from a comedy, that gives them a quality no other kind of prediction can match. When a serious analyst or a journalist or a think tank publishes a report predicting that a certain trend will lead to a certain outcome, and the prediction turns out to be correct, we acknowledge their expertise and move on. We expect serious people to make accurate predictions sometimes. That is their job. When a political commentator warns that a certain policy will lead to a certain consequence, and the consequence materializes, we give them credit for their insight. But we do not feel the eerie, spine-tingling quality that we feel when a cartoon about a fat man in Rhode Island makes the same prediction in the form of a 5-second joke. The eeriness comes from the gap between the source and the significance. A cartoon is not supposed to see the future. It is not supposed to contain truths about real people and real events. It is supposed to be entertainment, disposable, temporary, forgettable. When something disposable turns out to contain something permanent, when something forgettable turns out to be unforgettable, the mismatch between our expectations and reality creates a feeling that we instinctively label as uncanny or eerie or predictive. It is not that the prediction itself is more accurate than a prediction from a serious source. It is that the prediction came from a source we were not taking seriously, and the fact that we were not taking it seriously is what makes its accuracy feel so strange. Seth MacFarlane understood this dynamic when he addressed it at the Television Critics Association. He said it is a strange thing to observe. He described the media cycle that surrounds each prediction, how one outlet picks up the clip, then another, until it goes viral and becomes part of the cultural conversation. He noted that the show makes the same kind of topical jokes as The Simpsons and South Park, and that those shows have their own prediction phenomena, but that something about Family Guy's specific combination of volume, darkness, and cultural reach has made its prediction reputation particularly strong. The Simpsons, it should be noted, has an even longer track record of apparent predictions. The Simpsons has been on the air since 1989, a decade before Family Guy. It predicted Donald Trump's presidency. It predicted Disney's acquisition of 21st Century Fox. It predicted the discovery of a new particle at CERN. The Simpsons prediction list is, by most accounts, longer and in some cases more specific than Family Guy's. But the two shows' predictions feel different in a way that is worth noting. The Simpsons predictions tend to be political and corporate. They feel like the product of smart writers who understood the trajectory of American institutions. Trump was already a prominent public figure with political ambitions when The Simpsons predicted his presidency. Disney was already acquiring entertainment properties at an accelerating rate when The Simpsons predicted the Fox merger. Those predictions feel like sharp cultural commentary that happen to be right. Family Guy's predictions tend to be personal and dark. They involve individual people's private lives, their deaths, their secrets, their hidden selves, Spacey's behaviour, Jenner's identity, William's death, the Boston Marathon, COVID. These predictions feel less like cultural commentary and more like something that accidentally looked through a window that was supposed to be closed. They carry an emotional weight that The Simpsons' predictions generally do not, because they are about human beings in their most vulnerable and most private moments. That emotional weight is probably the real reason the Family Guy prediction phenomenon persists and grows with each new apparent hit. People share these clips not just because the coincidences are impressive, but because the coincidences touch something real and human. A man who was hiding who he really was. A beloved comedian who was suffering in ways the public could not see. A community that was devastated by an act of terror. A world that was brought to its knees by a pandemic. These are not abstract events. They are experiences that affected real people. And the fact that a cartoon seemed to know about them before they happened gives the clips an emotional charge that a simple list of coincidences would not have. There is also a question worth asking about what these predictions say about comedy itself as a form of knowledge. Comedy has always operated on the principle of exaggeration. You take something that is true and you push it past its normal boundaries. You take a behaviour and amplify it. You take a trend and follow it to its most extreme conclusion. You take a rumour and say it out loud. You take an uncomfortable truth and make it the punchline, because comedy is the one space where uncomfortable truths can be spoken without requiring anyone to take responsibility for having said them. That principle, the principle of exaggeration as a tool for exploring truth, is what makes comedy one of the oldest and most powerful forms of social commentary. Jesters told kings the truth, because the truth delivered as a joke did not require the king to respond to it as a political challenge. Satirists have always used comedy to say things that could not be said in earnest, and writers' rooms like the one at Family Guy, filled with people who live inside a culture and observe it from close range, use comedy to process what they see in a form that is allowed to be wrong, to be extreme, to be unfair, and to be forgotten if it does not resonate. But sometimes it does resonate, and sometimes the exaggeration turns out not to be an exaggeration at all. Sometimes the thing that was pushed past its normal boundaries lands exactly where reality was going to go anyway. And when that happens, the joke stops being disposable. It becomes a record, a time-stamped document of something that was true before anyone was ready to acknowledge it. That is what Family Guy's predictions are. They are not prophecy, they are not magic. They are not the product of a writer's room with access to information the rest of the world does not have. They are records, thousands and thousands of records, produced week after week for 25 years, of what was in the air at any given moment, what the culture was thinking about, what the industry was whispering about, what the trends were suggesting, what the logical extremes looked like when you followed the threads all the way to the end. Most of those records are unremarkable. Most of those jokes did not predict anything. Most of the thousands of cutaway gags produced across 447 episodes are exactly what they appear to be. Quick, dark, funny moments that came and went and were never thought about again. But some of them, a small but remarkable number, turned out to be records of something that had not happened yet. And the fact that they exist, that they are time-stamped, that they are preserved on DVDs and streaming platforms, and in the vast archive of a show that refuses to stop producing new content, means that we can go back to them. We can see when they were made. We can compare them to what actually happened, and we can sit with the strange, uncomfortable, fascinating feeling that somewhere in the noise of a cartoon about a dysfunctional family in Rhode Island, there were signals that nobody was supposed to hear. Family Guy premiered on January 31st, 1999, with 22 million viewers. It was cancelled after 3 seasons. It was brought back because the audience refused to let it die. It has been running ever since. It has been renewed through at least 2029. As of tonight, it has been on the air for more than 25 years. Somewhere in the episodes that have not been written yet, in the seasons that have been ordered but not produced, in the cutaway gags that have not been pitched in a writer's room, that is still assembling ideas for stories that will not air until 2027 or 2028. There are jokes that will seem completely ordinary when they are broadcast. Jokes about politicians, jokes about celebrities, jokes about events that have not occurred, jokes about people who have not yet done the things that will make them newsworthy. Some of those jokes will be forgotten within seconds of airing. That is the nature of the format. That is the nature of a show that produces 20 or more episodes per year, each one loaded with a dozen or more cutaway gags that reference every conceivable aspect of the culture. But some of them, a handful that no one can predict in advance, will turn out to be right. Something will happen in the real world, weeks or months or years after the episode airs, and someone will go back to the clip and post it online and say, "Family Guy predicted this again," and the list will grow. And the feeling, that strange, uncanny, impossible to fully explain feeling that a cartoon about a loud man in green pants keeps accidentally describing the future, will grow with it. Seth MacFarlane calls it escape velocity. He uses the phrase to describe where Family Guy is now, as a show. It has been moving for so long and so fast that it no longer needs the original force that launched it to keep going. It sustains itself. It keeps producing. It keeps referencing. It keeps making jokes about everything, all the time, without pause. And somewhere in that unending stream of comedy, the future keeps turning up. Not because anyone is putting it there on purpose, but because when you say enough things about enough subjects across enough years, reality starts to rhyme with the things you said. That is the story of every time Family Guy predicted the future. It is the story of a show that was in the right place at the right time, with the right format and the right writers, and the right willingness to say things that other shows would not say. It is the story of coincidence and insider knowledge and cultural observation and statistical probability and the strange, irreducible remainder that is left over when all of those explanations have been applied and some of the predictions still do not feel fully explained. It is also, ultimately, the story of comedy doing what comedy has always done. Saying the thing that is not supposed to be said. Naming the thing that is not supposed to be named. Pushing the truth past its comfortable limits and seeing where it lands. Most of the time, it lands nowhere in particular. But every once in a while, it lands on something real. Something that has not happened yet. Something that nobody sees coming except a cartoon that was not even trying to look. And that thought, the thought that somewhere in the vast, chaotic, irreverent archive of a show about the Griffin family, the future has already been written as a punchline that nobody took seriously, is either the most unsettling thing about Family Guy or the most oddly comforting. Because if the future is already sitting in a joke somewhere, waiting to happen, then maybe the world is not as random as it feels. Maybe there are patterns in the noise. Maybe the things that have not happened yet are already contained in the things that are happening now, if you know where to look. Or maybe it really is just a stopped watch. Maybe a show that has been running for 25 years and has produced more cultural references than most encyclopedias simply cannot help but overlap with reality from time to time. Maybe the human brain finds meaning where there is only coincidence, and the internet amplifies that meaning until it feels like truth. Either way, the clips exist, the dates are real, the headlines happened, and the show is still running, still producing, still throwing darts at a board so vast that some of them have to land somewhere important. Family Guy will air new episodes tomorrow and next week, and next month, and next year. And somewhere in those episodes there will be a joke, a quick one, a cutaway gag that lasts 5 seconds. A reference to a person, or an event, or a situation that nobody thinks twice about when it airs. And then, one day, months or years from now, something will happen. Something in the real world. Something that nobody saw coming. And someone will remember that joke. They will find the clip. They will post it. And the conversation will start all over again. That is the strange magic of a show that has been running long enough to become part of the background of American life. It is not predicting the future. It is reflecting the present in such high volume and such high resolution that the reflection sometimes captures things that have not finished forming yet. Things that are still taking shape. Things that are on their way to becoming real but have not arrived yet. Family Guy sees them because it is looking at everything, all the time, without blinking. And every once in a while, one of the things it sees turns out to be tomorrow. That is worth falling asleep thinking about. The idea that somewhere in a cartoon you have watched 100 times, there is a joke you laughed at years ago that has not come true yet. A joke that is sitting there, ordinary and forgettable, waiting for the world to catch up. And one day it will. And when it does, someone will find the clip. And they will share it. And they will say, Family Guy predicted it again. And they will be right. Not because the show can see the future, but because the show has been looking at the present for so long, so carefully, and with such an extraordinary willingness to say whatever comes to mind, that the present and the future have started to blur together in the margins of its episodes. And in those margins where nobody is paying close attention, where the jokes are too quick and too dark and too strange to take seriously, the truth keeps showing up uninvited. That is the legacy of every time Family Guy predicted the future. A show that never stops talking eventually says something true. And a truth spoken as a joke, years before anyone is ready to hear it, is the strangest kind of truth there is. Good night.